sometime in the near future when everybody feels safe.
So you people on Facebook, we're going to be starting in about 5 minutes, and I'm right in front of you with your pink lipstick. and we'll be starting in 5 minutes at 6:30, and if you're watching the recording, you can skip ahead 5 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, say sorry about that, Kia.
Say that again, Patricia.
No, I said sorry about that. Burke was talking to the Facebook folk, letting them know we're getting ready to start. So I apologize. Yeah, how was school coming?
It's awesome. You know, just trying to maintain that safety and you know, everybody is everybody's so polar opposite. It's either way over here to the left or way over here to the right.
Yeah. I hear you. Oh, Lord. You're right. Oh, gosh. Oh, looks like Cheryl is joining us.
Cheryl.
Yeah, Cheryl Dean.
Okay.
She's trying to connect. I don't know if she can hear yet.
Okay. All right, and you got it up. Good. And when are you going to go to the slideshow view of that?
As soon as she's connected.
Where's Gino Martino, the world's strongest man? I got to see Ron and Gene again today. This morning we were on Gene's live broadcast that he does from Tennessee. We have a Bible study at 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern, and he does it on Facebook and on Zoom just like we do.
Okay.
So Ron and I were on Zoom, and then he had like 17 people viewing from his church, which sounded just like us. You know, we can have anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 people on Zoom, and then we usually have around 15 to 20, sometimes a little more on Facebook, and then people start watching the recordings, and the numbers start going up in terms of views. But just in terms of live view, I always take a look right afterward and see if I can see what the number is, and gives me an idea of how many people were there. If you're just joining us, we're going to start on time, hopefully. By my laptop, what time is it? By my laptop,
it's 6:28.
I'm having issues.
6:28. Let me go to that view. Is that helpful to you?
It is, but I need to change the view so that I can switch and check on Facebook if I need to. How do I make this just a little smaller?
Just do escape.
Perfect. All right, now I need to make it a little larger. Well, actually, that'll be fine probably. A little bigger. I don't know. That's about right. So I can see with it like that. I can see if anybody makes a comment right there.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
Okay.
Can you go to the next slide and let me see if I can read it?
Press the button.
I can read it fine. Yeah. Yes. Cheryl Dean. Tell me, remind me how I know you. Have you got your mic muted, Cheryl? Are you in Gene's church?
She's muted, but no, she's not muted.
I don't see her. I see. Have you let her in? Okay.
Cheryl, can you hear us? She's speaking. I can see she's talking because the thing is around the edge, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, Cheryl, something wrong. You got to. You must have something else muted. See if your laptop volume is muted, or your microphone is not working, or something. We're glad you're here. If you can hear us, that's fine. You don't have to say anything, but we'd love to hear from you if you can figure it out. And we need to go ahead and start, even though Gino Martino's not here. You don't have Gene's number, do you?
I should. Let's see.
You could text him. Well, hey, everybody. We're glad that you're here. We've got it all set up, and we've got folks with us here on Zoom, and we welcome those of you on Facebook. Appreciate you being here. We'll be recording this tonight. It will be on the Owl Rock group page where you are. Or if you're on Zoom and you want to watch it again, you can watch it on the Owl Rock group page on Facebook, or you can go, I'll be loading it later tonight. I'll be loading it to my YouTube page. It's just Bert Gary. Every letter is lowercase, little b, little g, Bert Gary. And all the sermons and Wednesday night studies are there, and I've broken them down into sort of playlists about different subjects, different topics. All the Wednesday night ones are together. And last week we looked at Lucifer. We're kind of in a series that we've started on Satan, and we transitioned with Lucifer last week, learning about that. Catch up and watch that one. Turns out Lucifer is not a name for Satan, and nobody knows it. And if you want to know why, go back and watch last week's video. Excuse me. I'm drinking Coke, and it's like I shouldn't drink Coke when I do this show.
Oh, perhaps.
It tastes good, though. It's cold.
Here's Dale and Paula.
Hey, Dale and Paula.
Hey, welcome, y'all.
Dale and Paula coming in right now. So this is my cover page for those of you who are on Zoom. You can see this on your screen. For those of you who are on Facebook, you're just going to have to bear with me holding these pieces of paper up. Let me do it one at a time. Right there. So we're going to talk about the talking snake with legs. Obviously, we're talking about the Garden of Eden. And the question, I guess, is the snake in the Garden of Eden that talked to Adam and Eve, the talking snake, is that Satan? And how do we know if it is or not? We're going to look at that tonight. We ready to go?
Yep.
Let's start this way. Last week, Patricia said that she'd always been taught. Next slide, please.
1 second, letting in Jean.
Oh, we're letting Jean in. One sec.
And the Cheryl is Paula.
Oh, Paula Cheryl. All right. Okay, so welcome to on Zoom to Kia and Paula and Dale, and also Jean coming in. Gino Martino, is he in yet? Where is he?
Yes.
I am not seeing him.
Right here. Right there.
Oh, you got to move it over? There's an arrow. We got too many people for me to fit on one screen. Okay, there we go. All right, so last week, see this slide right here. Patricia shared last week that she'd always been taught that Satan was an angel, and he was a choir director of the angel choir in heaven before he rebelled against God and was cast down. And I did a little snooping and found out the source of this belief. It's Ezekiel 28, you can see it, Ezekiel 28, 12 through 19. Y'all aren't going to believe this. And it's a great segue into the study we're doing. Look at this in Ezekiel. Okay, so God told Ezekiel to exaggerate how great Tyre's king was at the beginning of his reign to emphasize how far that he had fallen. So in Ezekiel 28, 12, mortal, that also can be son of man, translation, literally son of man, mortal, raise a lamentation over the king of Tyre, and say to him, thus says the Lord. Now remember, he's going to exaggerate his qualities using biblical images to say how great his kingdom was and how good things were and how great he had it. Okay? And then he's going to talk about how bad he is now, just to sort of exaggerates and amplifies his fall from grace. So, first thing he says is that you were like the kings David and Solomon, stamped with the seal of perfection, of complete wisdom and of perfect beauty. It's an exaggeration, but he's trying to say, man, you were great, you know. And then he says of the king of Tyre, and remember from last week that we looked at the word Lucifer, which is in Hebrew is Hallel. It means morning star in Isaiah 14. And remember that God told Isaiah to speak out against the king of Babylon. That's Nebuchadnezzar II. Against the king of Babylon, But for centuries, Christians have mistakenly believed Isaiah was writing about Satan. We saw that last week, right? Mm-hmm. So something similar is happening right here. God told Ezekiel to speak out against the king of Tyre, and this king has also been mistaken for Satan in these verses. And I'll show you how. Mm. So here's the important part right here. We're getting close to it. This is the setup. So continuing with Isaiah's exaggeration of how great the king of Tyre is, you are like Aaron, that's Moses' brother, the high priest of all high priests, the first high priest of Israel, with his breastplate covered in precious stones, worked in gold were your settings and your engravings. Now this phrase is the source of the notion that Satan used to be a heavenly choir director. How so? Look at how it's translated in the King James. Thy workmanship of thy timbrets and of thy pipes. That's not the same. Worked in gold were your settings and your engravings, and the workmanship of thy timbrets and thy pipes. Those are very, very different, aren't they? So what's going on here? Let's take a look. Tabrets and pipes are musical instruments. They're like tambourines and lutes. Settings and engravings that he's talking about in terms of Aaron, the high priest, have to do with the mountings that hold the precious stones to the priestly breastplates that you see here, and to the writings on it. You can see that there are writings on it as well. The engravings and the settings. The settings are the mountings that hold the stone to the breastplate. Or, as King James says, of thy tabrets and thy pipes. So why are these translations completely different? And what's the right way to translate it? Well, let's take the first one. This is the word that is being translated as tabrets. It's also the one being translated as settings for the jewels on the stones on the breastplate. I looked at 22 translations of the word toph, and 9 of those 22 translations translated it as a musical instrument, either tabrets or timbrels or timbres or tambourines. 8 of them opted for settings for the stones, and 5 were others. Some of the others were things like things of great price or beauty. Okay, so which is it? Well, if you add it all up, 9 of them vote for musical instrument, and 13 of them vote for something else, including settings, which was the #1 response amongst them. So which one is it? Notice I've got down at the bottom here the name of the king of Tyre. Josephus helps us with the dates in one of his works. His name was Ithobal III, and he reigned from 591 to 573. Now, Ezekiel 28 is the source of the belief that Satan was the musical director of an angel choir in heaven before he rebelled and was cast down. How can that be when, #1, Satan by name does not occur in the book of Ezekiel? #2, the words angel, choir, director, and musicians do not occur in the book of Ezekiel. 3, Tyre's king is who Ezekiel identified as the person God told him to write about, not Satan. 4, 2 words in 28:13 could be translated as musical instruments, tambourines and pipes, but most English translations prefer the word settings for toph. Those are the gold mountings for the precious stones on the breastplate of the priest, or prefer something else. So it's 13-9 other than musical instruments. 5, English translations over 120 years old tend to prefer the musical instruments, while translations since 1901 tend to prefer settings or something else. And last, the ESV, the English Standard Version, the New International Version, and the New Revised Standard all have footnotes about this particular phrase, about the settings, or about the tambourines, whichever it is. All say that the meaning of the Hebrew here is quite uncertain. So here's my questions. How can a musical angel named Satan be the subject of Ezekiel 28 when the meaning of the key Hebrew phrase is uncertain? The versions of the Bible after 1901 reject translating it as musical instruments. 13 out of 22 translations reject translating it as instruments. Ezekiel identifies the king of Tyre as the subject of the verse, not Satan. The words angel, choir director, musician, they don't occur in Ezekiel, and Satan is not named in Ezekiel at all. You still think Satan was a choir director in heaven? Because that's the only verse they use to justify it. It has nothing to do with Satan. This is an example of how, over the centuries, traditions start over misinterpretations of a text, and people just pass it along like fact. It was like I was telling you, Patricia, and you were like freaking out. Everybody, you've heard so many sermons about Peter being crucified upside down or Paul being beheaded. That's not the Bible either. But don't tell people that, they'll freak out, like Patricia did a few weeks ago.
I'm still freaking out.
Okay, so here's the perfect segue to the Garden of Eden, because Ezekiel just mentioned how, the king of Tyre, you got it made. You're like Adam. You're in the Garden of Eden. You're chilling, man. How did it go so wrong? So let me hold this one up. With all of this resolved about Satan being a choir director, we need a segue. While we didn't find Satan in Ezekiel 28:13, the verse does mention Eden, the garden of God. So let's go to Eden there, and let's look for Satan there. Maybe we can find him.
Yep, I'm sure he's there.
All right. Ever heard this word before? This word is etiology. It means giving the reasons for things being the way they are. Why are things the way they are? Genesis 3 is full of etiologies, full of them. And I'm going to give you an example here. All right, and this involves, of course, our snake. Genesis 3 contains etiologies from the Greek idea, and that means cause, and logia, which means study, which means, the study of causes, giving reasons for. So I'm going to read Genesis 3:14 and 15. The Lord God said to the snake, this is God talking to the snake. The word for snake is nachash. Because you have done this, cursed are you. He lied to Adam and Eve and wrecked things for them. Remember? Because you have done this, cursed are you among all animals and among all wild creatures. Upon your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will strike your head, and you will strike his heel. Boy, that's describing a snake, not Satan. It's last time I checked, Satan doesn't slither and eat dirt the rest for all his days. God proclaimed the snake would slither on the dirt. Well, if that's Satan, then Satan should be slithering in the dirt all his days.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
It's a metaphor.
A metaphor. Oh, we're not going to take it literally? Oh, that's a real shame.
It's a metaphor for Satan, the snake.
Okay, so let's go to the next one.
Just moves like that. Okay?
So, let's go to the next one. So, in what I just read, in 3:14 and 15, we have etiologies. The questions are, why don't snakes have legs? And why do humans fear and hate snakes more than any other animals? And why does human contact with snakes lead to snake bites or headless snakes or both? Now, these verses give us the answers. Things are the way they are because of the curse of the snake for lying to Adam and Eve. This is Genesis' answer to why we hate snakes and we kill them. I hear people say all the time, the only good snake is a dead snake. And I always want to say to them, well, do you like rodents in your house? Oh, no, I hate rodents. Well, quit killing the snakes then. That's why they're getting in. The snakes will eat them. Come on, people, think. Anyway, all right, so what do the three curses tell us about the snake before it was cursed? On your belly you shall go, now that you're cursed. Well, if God curses it and puts it on its belly, that means it had legs.
Right.
Okay, so it means that the snake had legs before. Leglessness was the curse, right? Number 2, enmity between the snake and the woman, and between the snake's offspring and hers, means that the snake and the woman and humans, I guess, did not hate and fear snakes before the curse. There's no problem before the curse. The curse is why we are all freaked out by snakes. And then the third one, humans will strike the snake's head, and the snake will strike the human's heel. means that humans and snakes did not strike each other before the curse. Right? Okay. So, but there was also a curse on the woman. I'm going to do the man too, so don't feel like I'm going to cheat you guys. I'll do the woman first. So here's another etiology. It says, God says to the woman, in pain you shall bring forth children. That's 1. Your desire shall be for your husband. That's 2. And 3, he shall rule over you. Now the etiological question is given that childbirth is extremely painful and dangerous, and given that men rule over women, why in the world do women still desire men? They get you pregnant, you go through labor, you go through delivery, it's total hell, and you still desire them. And then they tell you what to do, and they boss you around, and yet you still desire them. Okay, well, why is it like that?
Because they're crazy.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so the answer Genesis gives is not that men are crazy or women are crazy, but it's the result of the curse. So what does this tell us about the woman before the curse? Childbirth would have been easier. Adam did not rule over Eve. That changed at the curse. Male domination and the severity of labor and delivery are not the way things are supposed to be. These things are the result of the curse.
That's how feminism
Get
came
it?
about.
Next.
That's another subject.
Oh, I don't know. Okay, so how about guys? Okay, guys, here's yours. So, guys, God talks to Adam, says, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you shall eat all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall bring forth for you. And you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. So the etiological questions are, why do men perpetually have to work themselves to death for food? And why do people die and turn back into dust? And the result is because of the curse. That things are that way because of the curse. So what does that tell us about Adam before the curse? He didn't have to toil until he died because Eden would have provided ease forever. He just picked the fruit off the trees. And working himself to death is not the way things are supposed to be. These are the results from the curse. This is etiological literature. Genesis 1, 2, and 3 and beyond is full of things like this, explaining why these things are the way they are now. So here are the questions that a biblical literalist might ask. These are good. All right, so here, the next one. So, before the curse, could all snakes talk or just this one? Before the curse, could all animals talk or just snakes? How was the snake able to speak with no vocal cords and a long, slender, forked tongue, useless for talking? In what language was the snake speaking? Given that snakes today can't speak or understand speech, why and when did they lose these abilities?
Good question.
Biblical literalists would ask that question. I wouldn't, but they do. All right. Okay. All right. So the next one. I have a little cartoon for you. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me, Yahweh Elohim. Because remember, the snake said, Eve, did Yahweh Elohim say that you shouldn't eat from the tree of any fruit in the garden? You know, he asked all those questions and he used God's name. And in that particular section in chapter 2, the name used for God is Yahweh Elohim. That's why I put that there. Okay, so look. What does biology and paleontology say to us about talking, walking snakes? All right. One, snakes have never possessed the capacity to master language or speech. And 2, strangely, however, snakes used to walk on 4 legs. I'll show it to you. Look at this. Next. What are those 2 little bones right there? This is not an ancient snake. This is the skeleton of a modern boa constrictor. What are those 2 bones floating right there on either side of the snake's private parts? What's this thing sticking out over here? Of the bottom of that boa constrictor. Okay? These are the vestiges of legs that have been atrophying for millions of years. The legs are still in there. You can see the the pelvic girdle. You can see the femur bone, foot bone. It's got one finger and one claw, and on the back of it, it's got this spur, just like a chicken. And you know what they do with the chickens do with those spurs is they use it when they're fighting, and they use it when they're mating. So do boa constrictors. They use those spurs, they pull them up and use them for mating and for fighting. So why are these atrophied bones in here? Because snakes used to have legs. But it was an advantage to them as they adapted over millions of years. It was next one. It was an advantage to them to have smaller and smaller legs because they were taking advantage of burrowing and swimming. And the more streamlined you are, the faster and more efficiently and gracefully you can swim and burrow and go underground. The legs were getting in the way. Take a look at this recently found snake. There's his head. Okay, this is 100 million years old. It's a fossil. And folks, it's got external legs, but they're tiny. They could never hold that snake's body up. This is proof that over time they lost their legs. You can also see that it had front legs, and they're even tinier than the back legs. You follow? 100 million years ago. Next one. This is a modern lizard. And it's in the process of losing its legs. It's got two tiny front ones and two little back ones. Lizards and snakes both are in all kinds of different phases of leg loss. There are 100 species of legless lizards. This is not a snake. This is a lizard. The way we can tell is that snakes don't have external ear holes. This creature does, even though it doesn't have legs. It has eyelids. Snakes don't have eyelids. It can't unhinge its jaw like a snake to eat prey bigger than its head. And it doesn't have a forked tongue. And most interestingly, this thing has lost its tail and grown it back. You see that break right there in the pattern?
Mm-hmm. Right here,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's an eastern glass lizard. And its tail is longer than its body. And if it's being attacked, it will detach from its tail, leave that tail there wiggling and wobbling. The predator gets the tail, and the lizard survives and grows a new one. Snakes can't do that. This is an example of how animals change over time based on how their accidental mutations can turn into adaptations that help them survive over the ones that don't have that trait. So let me show you this. Next one. All right. So this brings Genesis into tension with creationism. So I wondered how many people believe that the world was created like it says in Genesis. So I did a little research. Now, a creationist, so these are bad definitions, but they're the best I can do. A creationist believed that everything came to existence exactly as the Bible says. God created everything there is in 6 days about 6,000 years ago. In a Pew poll, they found that 38% of the people believed that. All right? How many people are evolutionists who believe that creation wasn't, or the universe came into being through, and humans came into being through natural processes, not acts of a supernatural being, that life emerged on Earth, and that humans and all creatures have evolved over billions of years? About 24% kind of fit there.
That's a lot.
They take God out of the picture and focus on what the science says. But there's another option. And I didn't know what to call it. One guy online called it theistic evolutionist. I'm going with that, but I hate it. I'd feel more comfortable with Christian, but there may be other religions that have people from other religions who feel the same way. Theistic evolutionists, let's say Christian evolutionists, just for the time being, because we're Christians. They believe God created the universe. Evolution was God's idea, and it works like the evolutionists say it does. And Genesis 1 and 2 is not written to convey historical or scientific facts, but theological truth about God, humanity, and the world. Let me say it again. God did create the universe using what we've learned from science about evolution. evolution's God's idea, and Genesis 1 and 2 was not written to convey how it happened historically or scientifically, but to convey truth about our God, the nature of God, humanity, our relationships, and the world.
Wow. I mean, those...
See, those are the basic three options, I think. What were you thinking?
I'm surprised that the evolutionists, the percentage is so high. I didn't know that it was that high.
I'm surprised the creationist is high, and I'm surprised that the evolutionist is low. I had the opposite response.
Really?
Yeah. I think that's pretty high for creationists. I looked on some other sites at some other polls. It depends on how you ask the question, what kind of responses you get. And there are all kinds of different groups out there, because you can't say Christians believe this way, because there's so many different kinds of Christians and they believe so many different kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just to get a little backup here from someone who is one of the world experts on the development of the Hebrew Bible, listen to what she wrote. There is no clear link anywhere in the Bible between Satan and the Eden talking snake. That's what I found so far. In my studies over the years and today, I see absolutely no link. And I have used my Bible software to look at every single reference to Satan, the devil, and anything that the devil is called, like Beelzebul or the evil one or whatever. All right. She also wrote that there are 0 known writings until after the New Testament that Satan is clearly understood as the serpent and evil. The idea that the serpent, what she's saying is, the idea that the serpent or the snake in the Garden of Eden was Satan was not believed or known by the Hebrew people who wrote it, by the people who lived through the Old Testament period, or by any writing in the Bible. It happened external to the Bible and external to that time period. All right? And a little more detail here from the same woman. So again, this is a quote. The concept of the devil begins to appear, that there is a devil, begins to appear in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC Jewish texts, particularly 1st Enoch. Here we go with 1st Enoch again. He's where we get all our bad ideas. So many Christians read 1st Enoch in the 3rd and 4th century. It really messed things up. And they read those things into their faith and into the Bible, and we're still trying to get the camel's butt out of the tent. Anyway, in 1st Enoch, which is not in your Bible or the Apocrypha, the, quote, angel who, quote, led Eve astray and, quote, showed the weapons of death to the children of men was called Gadriel. So this angel was not called Satan. He was called Gadriel by 1st Enoch, but he labeled the serpent an angel. And that's the first known written evidence. And it's from a book not in your Bible that's full of stuff that's heretical. And it's not in the Jewish Bible. It's not in the Christian Bible. It's not in the Catholic Bible. It's in nobody's Bible. All right? Second quote. Around the same time, a book called The Wisdom of Solomon, which is in the Apocrypha, Catholics have it in their Bible. Okay, The Wisdom of Solomon, or it's also called the Book of Wisdom, but it's not in our Protestant Bible, taught that, quote, through the devil's envy, death entered the world, and those who are on his side suffer it. That quote was used to support the 1st Enoch idea, so it doesn't come right out and say that the devil is the snake, but it does say through the devil's envy, death entered the world. That suggests that it was at the very beginning, and people assume that means Eden, and therefore the devil must be the snake. It was just a process of logically coming to that conclusion, and it's not logical to me, but it was to them. That's Shauna Delansky, Carleton University. All right, next one. So here's another problem. When people say, I take the Bible literally, I say, fine. What about parables? How do you take a parable literally? Then people say, well, I take the creation story literally. I'm a creationist. Well, which creation story are we talking about? There are 2 in Genesis. So look at this. Genesis 1, and that's 1:1 through 2:4a. Okay, read what I've got there.
Moses
Oh, if I got the wrong one up. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I'm sorry. 2 creation stories, yes. Moses was traditionally credited as the author of the first 5 books of the Bible. This is highly unlikely. And Genesis 1 and 2 gives us an example of why. At Genesis 2:4b, there is an abrupt change in style, vocabulary, and message. Here we have an independent story of creation. Genesis 2:4b through 25, not a continuation of Genesis 1. Genesis 2:4b introduces us to a new writer who scholars call the Yahwist source because he always uses Yahweh for God's name. The author of Genesis 1 is called the priestly source by scholars. He uses Elohim for God's name throughout Genesis 1. There's also another source, you can see it here at the bottom. There's also another source that they call the Elohist that also uses Elohim for God's name at first. Okay, so, but we're not talking about him. We're talking about the priestly writer and the Yahwist. It's the nicknames that they give to them. Now look at the difference between these two. It's radical. Genesis 1 is on the left. Genesis 2 is on the right. In Genesis 1, the spirit of Elohim, while hovering in a formless, empty darkness above landless waters, spoke everything into existence by commanding 6 times to let something exist or be made. This is the priestly source. It's creation by word or command, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Over on the right, we have Genesis 2, another creation story, different style, different theology, different name for God. It says in Genesis 2:4b and following that the Yahweh Elohim, after the dry, lifeless land got watered by a spring, shaped a man from mud with his own hands, just as a potter shapes clay into a vessel. This is the Yahweh source. Not creation by word, but creation by hand. These are extraordinarily different. Mm-hmm. Look at the order in which things were created. Over on the left, you have in Genesis 1, the priestly source, you have 6 days. First was created light, which includes day and night, then the sky, then the dry land and plants, then the sun, moon, and stars, then land and sea creatures, and then last, humans. But on the right, in Genesis 2, starting at 4b, a human was created first, a living man. God breathed life into the mud man that he made with his own hands by breathing. God breathed into his nostrils. Number 2, and this is not day 2, this is the same day. There aren't days in Genesis 2:4b. The next thing he did was he made fruit because he figured the man needed to eat something. And he put the fruit trees in the Garden of Eden with a river. So he plants some trees for him. And then he thinks, oh my gosh, he's alone. I'll get some, company for him. So he made land animals with his own hands. And Adam comes by and names them all. And then he made a living woman by putting Adam to sleep and taking a rib from his side. So over here we have a schedule keeping day of a 6-day carefully made plan. And over here we have God trying and fixing without a schedule. It's like, well, he's feeling lonely. Maybe I should make some animals. You see how one's kind of scheduled and serious and one is kind of playful and story-like? Mm-hmm. All right, look at the difference here. Over on the left, the priestly source. Let there be, okay? This is Genesis 1. It's majestic and proper with a formulaic repetition and refrains like, let there be and let us make. And God saw that it was good, and God saw that it was good, and God saw that it was good. He says it over and over again. Mm-hmm. And then, so God created humankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. 3 times he repeated the word created and twice the word image. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And there was evening and there was morning the second. Hear how formal? It's not a story. No, this is a report. Mm-hmm. This God is a commander with authority on a schedule. Sounds like a general. But look on the right, the Yahweh source, Genesis 2. This story is approachable and intimate, a story with conversational tone. Then the Lord God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into life and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. So out of the ground the Lord God formed every animal of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Look, this is a potter who's curious. Completely different. Completely different. God's different. What happens is different. The style is different. The names for God are different.
Very invitational. I'm
almost finished. We're going to have a lot of time to discuss. All right. This is the next to the last slide. So, what is this material in Genesis 1 and 2? And by that matter, all the way up to Genesis 11. So, you're familiar with parables, but I'm not sure you're as familiar of the definition of a fable. Is Genesis 1 through 3 a fable? I'm asking the question. So, the definition of parable is over on the left. A parable is a very short story that teaches a moral or spiritual lesson. Examples include the parables told by Jesus like the Good Samaritan, but parables also include popular stories like the boy who cried wolf. Is there anybody who doesn't know what that story is? Have you heard it? Yeah, okay, just making sure. And what's a fable? A fable is a short story, usually with talking animals. Talking snakes, maybe? That conveys a truth. Talking animals, short story, conveys a truth. A popular example of this story is the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise and the hare talk. One of them's like, I can beat you in a race. And the other one's like, no way. You know, and the truth that's conveyed is that slow and steady is better than going zooming off and running out of gas. Yeah? So, is Genesis 1 through 3 and maybe beyond a fable? So here's my concluding slide. And this is for me, this is the key for our learning tonight. I wanted you to know why there are 4 reasons that most people don't take Genesis 1 through 3 literally. Meaning, this is the way the earth really was created. This is the way humans really were created. All right? Number 1, science and history contradict a literal interpretation of Genesis 1 through 3. Number 2, there are fantastic elements in Genesis 1 through 3 that don't jibe with everyday reality. God used his hands to mold the first human out of mud. There are 2 trees with divine powers. That's the tree of life and the tree with the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. Magic trees, if you will. And there is a talking snake. These are fantastic elements, and that's the second reason why most people don't take Genesis 1 through 3 literally. And then number 3, the writings in Genesis 1 and 2 fit literary genres common to other cultures, like etiologies, why things are the way they are, and fables, stories that have talking animals that convey a truth. These literary forms are not and were never intended to be read as factual, historical records. And number 4, there are 2 creation narratives in Genesis, not one. And they are so different as to be irreconcilable. Which one do we take literally? We can't be taking both of them, they both can't be literally and historically factual. That's my presentation, and we can now discuss.
Breathe.
Talking snakes.
Oh, Lord.
So I'm sure as we were talking just now, the questions came to your mind, and thoughts, and let's reflect on, have we got Satan in the garden, or have we made a mistake?
Well, couldn't it be referring to Satan being the deceiver, we called last week with adversary?
Yes.
To Adam and Eve, and so using it metaphorically. I see it more metaphorically more than literal.
Yes. Okay. So let me play with that for just a second. Okay. So yes, I don't believe that the person who wrote this 25 or 2600 years ago had Satan in mind, because that concept did not exist as we know it today at that time. And given that that no one was really there when God created the heavens and earth, anything that we write about it is probably not going to be intended to be describing what factually happened, but describing why things are the way they are. Well, something happened in the beginning to make it that way. Well, what happened? Well, you see, there was a garden, and the first man and the woman were there, and they messed up, and so the curse changed things, and so now things are harder than they would have had to be because we sinned. This is an explanation. This is an etiology. And they even use a talking snake to convey this. So I think you're right in one sense, that the snake does have at least one good thing in common with Satan as described in the New Testament. They're both liars, and they're both crafty. But that's separate from saying, where does it say that the snake is Satan? Well, in the Bible, it doesn't say the snake is Satan.
I think it's assumed, though.
Oh, it's assumed by us today. But I just showed you that the idea didn't happen until somebody read Enoch 1 and the idea filtered in. It's not a part of the biblical intent to make it Satan. It's the way we have gone back and looked at it over the centuries and made the mistake of believing that that was the original intent when it can't be.
Well, maybe that's why Enoch did not make it into the 66.
No, there are a lot of reasons why First Enoch didn't make it into the Bible.
But we've referred to it a lot in these Bible studies where information has come from and we have grasped and held on to it.
Yes.
And so it's like...
Yes, I know.
No wonder. I mean, influence. It depends on who's written about it. We're going to go with it. If it's a well-known person, a name that we recognize or we believe in, who's a heavy influence, we're going to go with what they say. Usually,
it's not only First Enoch, because there are a lot of Hebrew writings and Christian writings that say a lot of things about Jesus, the disciples, or early figures like Moses and Elijah. They're not considered scripture, but people still read them, and we've been lucky to find, ancient copies of them sometimes. So there's a Catholic book, I think it's called the Proto-Evangelium, and it gives us a lot of information about Mary and her parents and stuff like that. It doesn't mean it's true. Could be, but it's not in what we would call the Bible, and the Catholics don't include it in the Bible either, although they revere them as being accurate. But you've never heard of it. Well, you've never heard of First Enoch either, but I'm just showing you that this scholar that I quoted, plus I've quoted other scholars in the past, First Enoch is a problem. It introduces to the idea that Gehenna was a hell-like place, which is and Jesus never used it like that. But the assumption from First Enoch got thrown into the New Testament by preachers and teachers and writers and commentators for centuries. And last week, the Lucifer thing, it was Augustine who really made that take off. He started telling stories about how Lucifer is Satan in Isaiah, and it's just not true.
So in Isaiah, where it gets thrown down, can we go back to that slide?
Which one?
It's thrown down.
Being thrown down is not in this slide.
Ezekiel.
Yeah. There's no thrown down in Ezekiel. That was last week.
That was last week.
Yeah. And it's not thrown down, it's tossed out.
That's right.
But it wasn't talking about Satan. At any rate, so we've introduced the problems with taking Genesis literally, and we've introduced the idea, at least in the creation narratives. We haven't got to any other parts of Genesis, but it's hard to take it literally when you've got lots of reasons not to, and there's no evidence in the Bible that the snake was intended to be Satan, that the original writer intended to be writing history or fact. There are lots of barriers to taking it the way creationists do. I was teaching one time, Patricia, in Jericho, over in the West Bank, and there's an excavation there, and I was showing them a Neolithic tower, probably 10,000 years old. It's one of the most famous buildings in the world. For a long time, they said it's the oldest tower in the world. They've since found others that were older, but not by much. It's an old tower, and I had a group of Presbyterian students, and a few of the girls circled up around me afterward privately, and they said, these are like, they're 18 or 19, right? And so these little girls are like, how old did you say it was? And I said, it's Paleolithic. It's about 10,000 years ago. She said, one of them, I guess she was the spokesperson. She says, well, how can it be 10,000 years old when God created the world just 6,000 years ago? See the kinds of problems you run into? The tension between creationism and scientific fact is a problem.
And a lot of evangelical Christians are creationists. I mean,
quite a few.
That's what I was taught 6,000 years ago.
So one of the expressions right now that you may be aware of on the internet, YouTube and elsewhere, there are evangelical Christians who have their own web channels where they argue that the earth is flat, because their preachers are showing them in the Bible how it describes that the earth is flat, and God created a dome over the earth for the skies to separate the water from above. That's why the skies are blue. That's water. And so there's got to be a dome to hold that water up. So we're in a bubble, like in one of those glass domes that you get at Christmas time and you shake it and the snow falls. So we're in a dome, and Antarctica is not a continent island on the bottom, on the southern pole of the earth. Antarctica is a ring around a pancake, a ring of ice, and it's guarded by NASA so nobody can figure that out. And that everything you've seen from satellites and space, it's all being faked with holograms. And they have, I mean, there's a cult out there, and they truly believe that the earth must be like it is in Genesis, because Genesis must be right. And so they deny that we went to the moon. They deny satellites. They deny all the laws of physics, and they do all kinds of crazy experiments to prove that the Earth is flat. And that's the kind of thing that comes from small groups that are trying to convince people, number one, to take the Bible literally, and number two, to believe that the ancients, these ancient stories were meant to convey fact, when in fact no one was there to tell you what happened in the beginning. They're conveying truth about God, and about our relationship to one another, and why things are the way they are. And this beautiful Yahwist, this source, man, he's like talking. Are you kidding me? It's like God makes all of these animals out of clay, and he says, I can't wait to see what Adam names them. And Adam comes out and he's going, dog, cat. I mean, this is very playful. Like donkey, I don't know what to call that. Duck-billed platypus. He's naming them, and it's just delightful. But we've turned it into, when you take it literally, it becomes a problem, especially since there are two creation stories, and as you saw, they are radically different.
Yeah. I know the first time you showed me that and we talked about it, I was just in shock. But I'm curious about, what y'all
What do y'all think? What do you think, Gino? What do you think, Dale? What's on your mind?
Oh, you're an interesting fellow tonight, Bert. As a retired pastor listening to conservatives for many years, your argument doesn't hold water at all. No matter what you can prove biblically,
that's right,
exegetically, it doesn't hold water.
That's right.
Because the Bible trumps, I use that word, science every time.
That's right. You can't argue with them. No. You can't change their mind. Most of them that change their mind.
During lunch, almost every Wednesday for the last year and a half, and he will tell you that Genesis 1 and 2 are not at all in conflict with each other, that they are not written by two different authors.
I know.
And that Genesis 2 is just a different way of presenting the creation story.
Of course.
And he firmly believes that.
Of course.
And also believes that the earth is only 6,000 years old, period.
Yeah, Dale, you're absolutely right. I work with people who feel that way all the time. I wouldn't call them conservatives, though. I think some of them are probably conservative politically or something. I would just call them fundamentalists. They are religious fundamentalists, and you can be a liberal. You can vote Democrat and still believe the literal Bible. I'm not sure I would use that word, but you can do what you want to. But at any rate, you're right, and I love those people. They're beautiful. They're wonderful people. They're beautiful people, and the people who realize, and most of them will one day. I really believe this. I believe that maybe not most of them, but a lot of them will realize something's wrong and will change their mind on their own terms. They'll read something or see something like this video or hear something, and just quietly they'll change their mind, and they'll be embarrassed that they ever believed anything so dumb, and they'll go on with their lives. Conservative or liberal, whatever they are, they learn that they have been mistaken, and nobody likes to be wrong. So there's no point in debating those things. But I tell you what, they do debate them online, and it gets ugly. They call one another names, and some of the creationists, of course, think that anybody who's that all evolution, you can't be a Christian and believe in evolution. And the evolutionists, some of them, especially the hardcore scientists, they believe you can't see science and then actually believe in God.
Yeah.
But then I know one of my favorite scientists is a cosmologist named Philip Davies, and he's a Christian. He has no problem at all with embracing his faith in Christ and his trust in the Genesis story as truth, while at the same time studying quasars that are happening some 13 billion light years from where we are, which means if it took the light 13 billion years to get to us, this universe is not 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I know. When I start hearing stories about finding fossils that are billions of years old, I'm like, really?
Yeah.
I couldn't fathom that.
It's hard for us humans to fathom that kind of deep time and deep space.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to imagine the distance to the moon, much less the distance to the other side of the universe.
I know.
Thank you, Dale. That's right. I mean, and you and I both encounter people in Israel too who are traveling over there with us or with someone else who's like those students are struggling with, wait a minute, my creationism is bumping up against what I'm learning.
Yeah.
What do I do with that? And that cognitive dissonance, I hope, is created as opposed to condemning. This is not about condemning anybody. Anybody can be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Something I told you tonight was no doubt incorrect or off somehow in terms of a detail or something. But of course, my goal is to not give you wrong information. And in the whole, I think I gave you factual and accurate enough information tonight for you to say, well, I'm listening to Bert and I can check it out, and he's giving me something to run with, you know?
Yeah, I'm going to go back over this again, the whole presentation, and take it in slowly, small bites. Because some of it, I mean, is just trying to really capture everything that you said. You know, I have questions about a lot of this. I mean, Gene, what are you thinking?
What's up, Gene?
You know, just north of us in Kentucky is a dedicated creationism site for the Ark of the Covenant. I'm sorry, for Noah's Ark.
For Noah's Ark.
And it is a massive recreation from a literal reading of Genesis, and very much they talk about, I have not been, I've just seen the website and people have tried to get me to go. You know, they make fun of dinosaurs and talk about the literal version of creation, exactly like Dale said. They have figured out how to swallow gnats and string camels and put two stories together.
Yeah.
And they built this massive wooden ark. And last year, they had a problem because they began to have wood rot because of leakage, and they didn't use pressure-treated wood.
Oh, no.
So they filed an insurance claim, and it was denied.
Oh, wow.
As an act of God.
That's a legal term for something that happens naturally, like lightning or whatever. Yeah, act of God.
Yep.
Wow.
So by an act of God, the Noah's Ark didn't get is falling apart. Okay, all right.
Yep.
Well, let's see. So here, if this is helpful, I'll mention this to you. The way that most scholars think about it, and my reading of it is this: that Genesis 1 through 11 cannot be counted on or interpreted as, and nor was it intended to be, historical. These are all fable-like stories conveying truths about prehistory. These are stories that grew up amongst the people of Israel that were popular and retold around countless campfires before they were ever written down. Now, then something changes when we get to Genesis 12, because we have Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Rebekah and Rachel and Sarah. We have what we call the first Israelites, Hebrews, or what we call patriarchs and matriarchs. Mm-hmm. Now, you can debate this, but these two have some fable-like character to them, but they sound more historical, and they are more focused on this family and their relationships. And they may be based to some degree, who knows how much, in fact, real persons who lived somewhere around 1800 BC, give or take. It's hard to say, but there are lots of place names and there are lots of stories that seem to have historical roots, but the roots are not very strong. Something that historians could really build on. After those narratives at the end of Genesis, we move into Exodus. And Exodus is full of a lot of historical information, but there are struggles trying to prove that happened historically too in Egypt. There's very little archaeologically that supports the narrative that the Israelites were enslaved and that they escaped, and that whole story about Moses and all that. I like the stories before it about Abraham and his family. I think it's rooted in some history. And we do have some stelas and other inscriptions that talk about the Hapiru people, Hebrew, Hapiru. Yeah. And sometimes they misspell Israel. Mm-hmm. And they talk about their conquests of Israel. Israel is no more and stuff like that. So, at a certain point, Israel was a real place, but the transition to real historical information that you can count on and that you can verify through other historical records doesn't start happening until the monarchical period after King Saul and David. And then we start having buildings and names and inscriptions with David's name on it and stuff like that, affirming that the historical record is getting better and clearer and more detailed. But there is no what we would call a modern historical record in the Bible. It's all theological history. It's about God and God's people, but it just has, as time went on, the more history got put into it. Yeah. The real history writers, the first history writers, were like Herodotus in the 500s or 400s in Greece. They began writing real histories where you say, this place is here, and these events happened on these dates with these people, and the people are described. Real histories like that aren't trying to be myth or legend or fable or parable or proverb or anything else. They're just trying to say, this is what happened and here's my record. Josephus started doing that, of course. There are lots of historians by the Roman period. But writing history, modern history as we would call it, didn't really start until after most of the Old Testament was in place. Yeah.
But I also noticed that Satan is referred to in the masculine gender.
True.
And I was curious too about that, because a lot of times women are referred to as the devil, or an influencer, or Jezebel or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's one of those things we need to look at as we do this study on Satan, because especially in the New Testament text that we'll be looking at, because the masculine gender is used for Satan. Is Satan a actual physical being? Is Satan a spirit or some sort of shape-shifting spirit or ghost or some sort of invisible demon? Is Satan a way of talking about something that's wrong with our hearts inside of us? You know, a sort of an anthropomorphism of a spiritual reality within human beings. Or is there
consciousness?
Yeah. So I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, but that's a good question. And gender comes up because gender is around reproduction. I mean, it's connected to reproduction. And so far as we know, you know, if you call someone a him, that's a hint that maybe. But
and then there are questions about the apple.
It wasn't an apple.
What does it mean? Was it referring to something else? You know, so you get all these things. I don't know.
The fruit of the knowledge of the tree of good and evil. So that's a little off the subject of Satan, but just so you know, it doesn't say that it was an apple. It just says it was fruit. It doesn't say what kind. Could have been, you know, anything, any fruit from a tree in the story. The trees that are most abundant and depended on by Israelite people for millennia has been the olive tree, but it could have been dates or plums or whatever.
Who knows?
Or a lemon. There could have been citrus. We don't know. Yeah.
Oh Lord. I don't know. Kia, Paula, what are y'all thinking?
Yes, sir.
Your premise is very accurate about what you're teaching tonight. But one of my questions would be, how do we attempt to convey a message that deals with good exegetical content instead of a message that's brought on by popular opinion? Because a lot of what you're sharing tonight is done because of your research and study in Scripture, and a lot of the people that you would be sharing that with, excluding this group perhaps, maybe some, would be people who would go, yeah, that's your opinion, but yours is based more on factual exegetical work, and what they're going on is opinion of people that reinforce what they have been taught and believe.
Yeah.
You know, that's a struggle in the life of the church today that I see, is that there are people who have these views contradictory to what you have taught in this segment, but yet it's being reinforced by the things and the people that they listen to.
Yeah, Patricia.
How do we change that? How do we change the narrative? That's my question, I guess.
Okay, I want Patricia to speak to that, or anybody else that wants to. What do you do when what I say in my study, or anybody else says in their study, contradicts what you and your entire church believed growing up? It's a real cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. Look at it for yourself. You have to take time, I would think, to research, study, and weigh the facts. Weigh what you've been taught with what you're hearing, and look at the facts. I mean, and really look at it through a lens that it's almost like another person. Like, I'm just going to forget everything I've been taught. I'm forgetting what Bert is saying, but I'm going to use this information and compare them and look at it objectively.
Yeah, I like what you just said, because it's like, forget that this is Bert, forget that he's teaching stuff, forget that the church taught me all this stuff. Let me just put this on the table. Let me have the courage to get curious, and I'm going to use what Bert was saying to look it up. It's a tool. So the thing is to give people a tool. Now, if I'm preaching on Genesis and the story, I don't do all this exegesis and try to prove anything to anybody. I go after the truth that inspires people. But if I'm teaching this stuff, I expose the tools I used. Yeah. I showed you where I got stuff. I showed my work, which means that you've got a tool you didn't have before. It's like getting a leg up on the horse so you can ride. But you can't enjoy riding if you don't have any idea how to get on the horse and you ain't got any help.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but Patricia, I think you're a person that is or was and still very willing to explore what the possibilities are.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that for a lot of people, they're unwilling to get out of the box because inside the box is safe, and their faith is based on what they have close around them instead of saying, I may be so threatened I can't even entertain the idea that there's something different than what I believe. So Bert and I have experienced travelers like that where Bert usually says, I'm not trying to convince you of something, but let me just tell you something that you can think about. And that's a threat to a lot of people where even the idea of something to think about, which is contradictory or it actually challenges their belief system, you can't seem to accept that.
Yeah.
Exactly, Dale. That's well said. Well said. What's going on with you, Kia?
Becky also typed something in.
Oh, I see Becky's comment. I'll get you in a second, Becky. You out there, Kia?
I am.
Hey.
One of the things that really kind of stood out for me as you were discussing this whole snake and the legs and the walking ability, one thing that kept crossing my mind is if we're looking at this study, why was it the snake that was chosen to be cursed? Out of all the animals, out of all of these creatures that were created by God, why this one did he say, and you will be cursed? That is the one thing that kept coming to my mind.
Yeah, well, I guess if you were writing a story today, this is all I mean, I'm just speculating. If you were writing a story today and you wanted to talk about, and the bad guy, you wanted the bad guy in the story to be an animal, what do you pick? Well, in a lot of the medieval stories, it was a dragon. You know?
Yeah.
And so I think the snake is a natural one to pick because people hate them. They're scared of them. And so you want it to have a kind of malevolence because it's lying. It's contradicting God. It's telling them things that are going to get them, that are going to hurt them in the end.
Yeah.
So I think it's just, it was a literary choice by the author to make the bad guy a snake.
And I think the more you learn about the snake or the animals, I was always afraid of them. They're still not my favorite animal. But I find myself now going with Bert, herping, looking for them, looking under rocks. I mean, who would have thought? I mean, not in a million years.
It's really...
so I think information, education, doing your own thing, being around them. Bert had held one the other day when we went on vacation, and it's like, okay, they're not as dangerous as I thought. So maybe, some are venomous and others are not. So learning the differences, I think all of that helps. Back to the same thing with studying and finding out for yourself.
That's brilliant, Patricia.
Really, I need to learn the scriptures. What does this mean?
Why am I irrationally afraid of new ideas? Why am I irrationally afraid of snakes? It's a great parallel. Yeah. It's a great parable of one or the other. And it just so happens, I don't really have an answer to your question, Kia. I just think that the author picked snakes because people don't like them. And somebody had to be the bad guy. Who's going to be the talking animal? Well, it turned out it was a talking snake with legs.
And we do all these plays, Someone has to play Satan. Someone's going to play Adam and Eve. No one wants to play Satan.
Who's going to be who's the kid that's going to be the hard-hearted innkeeper? Who doesn't exist and never did.
I know. No, I'll never play Satan. Not me. Not in the church. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So, there we have it. I just, I'm not sure. But Becky made a good point.
Yeah, Bert,
apple or lemon, who cares?
It's like, she says, one thing has been helpful to me is to ask, what difference does it make? Is Jesus the same to me, whether it was an apple or a lemon? If it makes no difference, I tend not to care. Straight up.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Was it a banana? Was it a fruit or was it a vegetable? people are going to make a case for a fruit because it's sweet and
Yeah.
it's more delicious to the eye, more appeasing, may taste better, it's juicy. So, I don't know. But, to compare with, what's the vegetable you don't like?
And plus, vegetable I don't like.
Yeah.
I don't like Brussels sprouts.
Brussels sprouts,
but
yeah.
I like all the rest of them.
I'm sure the tree was not Brussels sprouts
No,
in the
I
Garden
don't
of
think
Eden.
they grow on trees. I don't think so.
It was not
I
Brussels
could be wrong.
sprouts. It was something sweet and delicious.
Yeah, so you can, if you start trying to take those stories literally, then we start fighting over what language was the snake talking in.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what
Yeah.
what fruit was on the tree.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter. What kind of fig leaf was it? It doesn't even say that. So so these are questions that only a biblical literalist would ask. If you want to know what the author probably wanted you to ask, it's do you see yourself in the story? Do you see the truth? Which is that we're life's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Men struggle, women struggle. We struggle in our relationships, and it terrifies us not to be close to the God who made us. And we're fighting, fighting our own fear of God, and we're fighting trying to fight our way back to God. And Adam and Eve were terrified, and they were hiding. They felt exposed. They felt stupid, and they just didn't know what God was going to do. As it turned out, God was pretty good to them, even though the curses were the consequence. Still, God took care of them, and didn't smite them or something.
Yeah.
God made sure they had clothes, and God made sure that they had a place to go to. And it's like kicking your teenager out of the house. We help them with the payment on the first 3 months of their apartment and hope they don't come back.
But you know what, too?
I have to say something.
Yes.
So a couple years ago, at my job, they had apples in a basket, and I picked up one of the guys, my coworkers, was standing behind me, so I picked up 2 apples and I handed him one because he was coming to get one, and he says, "Oh no, I can't take an apple from a woman." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "What happened to the last man that took an apple from a woman?"
Man, you can get cursed in Piggly Wiggly and you didn't even know it.
Oh my God.
That is great. Thank you for that, Paula.
Oh my God.
Anything else, Patricia? We're running out of time.
Yeah, I want to go back to, and maybe not tonight, I was really thinking about the beginning of their presentation with the woman's desire to the woman, with the curse and all these things. I just started to think about that. I'm still stuck there.
Okay. Well, what if you look at it again and we'll talk about it anytime you want to, or if we need to do it here, if something comes up and that we need to look at it, we'll look at it soon. But we're going to continue with Satan next week. I haven't decided exactly which direction to go with it, but I promise that I will. It'll probably be something around the rest of the Old Testament, because we have some sort of heavenly creature named Satan in Job. And I think what we need to look at is that the Satan we all know about who is evil, or is that something else? Yeah. Because the scholar tonight in her studies found that it's something else. So let's see if the Satan that tempted Jesus, the Satan who was at work in the New Testament, is the same thing as Job, because in the Old Testament it means adversary, and so they use it a lot.
So do everything to him, but don't touch his soul.
Yeah, well, I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll do Job next week. I'm not sure, and then we'll move our way toward the New Testament after that, because there's not much to say else in the Old Testament, because Satan's just not really there much. We kind of ruled out, we ruled out Lucifer, and we ruled out the garden with the snake, and we may be ruling out Job, but we'll work on that maybe next week. Okay?
Yeah. Jean has the definition here.
My definition of a devil is a god who has not been recognized. That is to say, it is a power in you to which you have not given expression, and you push it back. And then like all repressed energy, I'm going to have to press C more. Like all repressed energy, it builds up and becomes completely dangerous to the position you're trying to hold. Joseph Campbell quote. Joseph Campbell, God rest his soul, was probably the leading world's expert on religious myth and cultural myth.
That's different. A devil is a god who has not been recognized. That is to say, there's a power in you to which you have not given expression, and you push it back. Then
he talks a lot about repression, and now the more we describe the power of the myth of Satan, the serpent, there's a lot of repression going on there.
Yeah.
Especially in Hoggly Woggly Piggly Wigglies.
That was such a great example. Just an amazing example. Thank you, Paula. You are so bad. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, wow. There's a lot to chew on here tonight.
We'll see you at Gene's church. What time's worship at your church, Gino?
10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock your time.
11 o'clock over here Eastern. And our worship at Owl Rock is at 10 o'clock Eastern and 9 o'clock Central. So you could actually watch both of them if you're home and want to watch worship. And looking forward to seeing you there.
So, Gene, your church is at 9 o'clock our time. Is that correct?
No.
It's before us?
No.
It's 11 o'clock.
Our church is at 9 o'clock his time.
Okay.
Our worship is at 9 o'clock his
Where do
time.
you serve? Gene, where do you serve?
At Lafayette, Tennessee, also known as Lafayette, to those who can speak French, in Macon County.
Okay.
Northeast of Nashville, about an hour and 15 minutes or so.
Okay.
Tennessee's a long state. He's a good bit away from you, Dale.
It's well worth the drive. I drove 4 hours to listen to a guy preach 3 Sundays ago. So.
And you came down to hear me.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Carthage, Mississippi not long ago.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Y'all, too, before we go.
I tour a lot of churches to figure out what they're doing for the Lord.
Okay, all right.
Or aren't. Yeah.
Well, I hate to say this, but I've been to a lot of boring churches.
Well, I want to say to you guys, to Dale, to Gene, to Paula, to Kia, thank you for paneling with Patricia and I. This has been great. Mm-hmm. Also, thanks to everybody on Facebook, especially Becky for in her recovery position, I'm sure on a couch somewhere.
Yes,
for
Becky
her
was
knee
thinking
for
of
her
you.
knee surgery. Thank you for chiming in too and for listening.
Oh, Sandra is there too today.
And Sandra's listening. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, and thanks everybody for being here, and we'll see you on Sunday, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
And also, I don't know if y'all heard too that Teresa died, Ruby's friend.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, Donna is still getting a little bit better. She's going to be taking more frequent and lower doses of chemos to help her tolerate it. Mm-hmm. She had dialysis today. All of her blood work is looking better. So I think we're turning a corner here. Mm-hmm. Thank you for continuing to pray for Donna. Also, thank you for contributing to her medical expenses, those of you who have.
Yes.
Appreciate you very much.
Thinking about all of you guys, Scott and Sean and Ruby.
And Ruby, we're thinking about you if you're out there.
And Sheila
You're
was
welcome,
traveling,
Becky.
I think. And Sheila's traveling.
We're missing Sheila tonight.
Yeah.
Sheila, if you're watching the recording or if you're watching live, hey to you. Anyone else?
I think that's it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we love you. Thanks for being here.
See
And
y'all
bye-bye.
later,
Have a blessed evening. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Amazing me.
All right.